Jeroen, lovely to meet you. You are a strong advocate of vested. Let's start with the question, why?
Well, Chris, thanks for having me on the show today. I'm an advocate of vested because I have seen that many transactional approaches in procurement do not work. Focus on lowest costs is for some commodities pretty logical, but for many other things that you buy, it's very unlogical. And vested creates a dynamic between buyer and supplier, which is much more cooperative and which will lead to great results. And this is actually why I really enjoy the concept of vested. And actually all methods that are into a collaborative mode between buyer and suppliers. Yeah. So that's a very short answer on why I like it.
No.
And if you see the results of these types of ways of buying and contract management, I think more organizations should go there and should not, be stuck into this traditional antagonistic buyer-supplier relationship.
And what's exciting about this moment in time? There does seem to be a shift, doesn't there, towards new thinking?
Yes, and I think that's because many organizations, they notice that this transactional way of working just doesn't work, and they are disappointed, both on the client side and on the supplier side, and they feel they need to do it in a different way, and we have seen this, over the last years in the Netherlands that people are willing to change because there's this necessity, right? So when you encountered problems for many years, then you can continue doing the same thing, but the outcome won't be different. So there needs to be a paradigm change, I would say. And in the Netherlands, many organizations have at least the willingness to try new things, so that's good. And we've seen that also in other countries.
I mean, again, this has been one of the themes that is the Scandic countries and the Netherlands have been really more progressive in this thinking than other parts of Europe, haven't they?
Yeah, so I see that as well. So I've seen at least that the Nordic countries and the Dutch have adopted vested, but also other approaches. And of course, it's in their nature also to collaborate. And there's this consensus-based, let's say, society. So that really fits. We have done some projects also in Belgium, which is a bit further south, and it also, is adopted over there. I'm not sure what happens if you go further down, and how those countries actually are buying their services. So I'm not too familiar with that, but I am familiar with the the willingness in the Nordics and in Holland to do this. And I think the Dutch have a pretty progressive procurement community. Also with lots of, let's say, professors and writing books and stuff. So maybe that helps as well. So we are quite at the forefront of the developments, I think.
Fair enough. Now, one of the reasons why I particularly wanted to look forward to talking to you, Jeroen, is that you've also done this in public procurement, haven't you?
Yes.
It's not just private procurement, because I think that's almost easier. Public procurement is always harder, isn't it? Presents
yeah, so well, this is different, and one of the ways why it's different is that you have to use regulations, right? So you cannot do whatever you feel like. You have to use the EU public procurement regulations, and for some organizations that is challenging. And mostly from a mental point of view, right? So many organizations, they feel that this EU procurement law is limiting them in their ability to try new stuff. But actually, that's not the case at all. So the EU directive actually gives lots of freedom and lots of space to do other stuff. And of course, it has to be transparent. It has to be objective and non-discriminatory, right? But within those rules, you can still do quite a lot. And what I see is that many organizations, they fear that they are doing something which could be unlawful, right? But if you explain it well, then they understand that, you know, there's actually quite some room for this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you've done over 70 contracts, I think, over public and private sector.
Yeah.
And how are you finding clients are adapting the way they think about all this?
Well, they see that when they dictate a lot and when they micromanage the supplier, that the results are, let's say, not optimal. And so they tried something new, and they try to let go, and they try to not define the how, but they go to, well, let's define the what needs to be done, and let's just give the suppliers the freedom to pick their own solution. And I think that's one of the great concepts of for example, Vested, that you know, it's about the what and not about the how. And we've seen that work quite well. And then what you notice is that when suppliers get more freedom, they come up with other ideas and other solutions. And because they are experts, way more experts than the buyers, you know, people at the buyer side, then you will get surprisingly different solutions. And that is what I think is one of the the best outcomes of these types of procurement processes. And many organizations, they have difficulty in letting go because they feel, the buyers, they feel that they have to dictate it. And one thing is that because they might not trust the supplier, right? Because if I don't say how you need to do it, you might mess up, because I think I know better. But that's one. And the second one could also be that and that's more, it's a bit more abstract, that if I don't dictate you and if I don't tell you how to do your job, what role do I have, right? So many people feel that they need to take a role, and they think that if I'm going to dictate to you what to do, that, you know, that's a good role. Whereas in your private life, you wouldn't be doing that, right? So if you hire a painter or somebody is going to fix your roof, you're not going to tell them how to do their work, right? You're going to say, well, this is what the end result I would like to see, and please go ahead, right? So in your private life, you don't take that role, but for some strange reason in your business life, many buyers are, actually dictating the suppliers how to do their work, and that's kind of a paradigm change, I would say. This is, in my opinion, the only way to get more out of vendors. And what I see at the vendor side is that they really appreciate this, because they are experts, and they know what they need to do, right? And they are very comfortable with getting the freedom on how to do their job. So I would say that would be one of the biggest reasons why these types of buying methods work, because the supplier is way more in control and in the lead, and can show his true expertise.
Very fair. Now, look, for those who don't know you, it's worth noting that you're an author and an educationalist as well, and actually you're seen as a real thought leader in best value.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Do you want to? So you really are an expert in trying to get the best value out of procurement. What are the key pillars of what you talk about in terms of your philosophy when it comes to buying and procurement?
Yeah, and I touched a bit on that just now, and because I think the most important part is that as a buyer or buyer's organization, I mean with that, you have to be comfortable to let go. And that's the, I would say that would be the core essence. And you have to be able to define what's your goal, right? So instead of defining the how, you have to define the why are you doing this in the first place? And what I notice is that many organizations, they have trouble defining why they like to do certain projects, and because they are not able to make that explicit, they dive also into the how. And what we teach actually for many years to these organizations is, well, please refrain from defining the how, but really think about why you would like to do this, and define the what. So what's your goal? What's your Mount Everest, right? What's the top of your summit, and what would you like to get realized? And then, of course, define a selection process or awarding process that creates this freedom for the suppliers to come up with their great ideas. And this means that instead of going into all the details, you have to lift your head and look at which of the suppliers really understands my goals. So that's one. And which of these suppliers really can show that he is able to do this. And what we have noticed is that many suppliers, they make all kinds of nice bids with lots of marketing in it, but they have difficulty really, let's say, substantiating why they're able to do this. So what we teach on the one hand is we teach the buyers to not go into all the details and to let go a little bit, and to let's say focus on the what. And we teach the suppliers to be very clear on why they're able to do this job, and not with fluffy marketing language, but with very substantiation, right, with metrics that show that you're able to do this. And again, that is not then describing the how, because I'm not interested in how you are going to paint my house or how you're going to fix my roof. You would like to know from the supplier how he makes sure that it won't leak for the next 10 years, right? And whether he has information on that. So a performance information that he's actually capable of saying, this is my track record. And so these are two important things, I would say.
Now, there's two questions out of it. Let's start with one. In the UK particularly, historically, we've been dominated by the control philosophy.
Yeah.
People have really struggled to let go. And I suppose the question is why? Why has that been such a struggle to let go historically? Is the first piece.
Yes. Well, I have not enough information to explain that, but we why it's in the UK at least. But what I see is that in the Netherlands, people also have difficulty letting go, right? Because there's when you've been when there was a situation that suppliers disappointed you in the past, then the immediate reaction is, okay, I need to write this in more detail because otherwise I'll get even more disappointed, right? So that's kind of a logical reaction. Yet at the same time, it will make it worse because you are going to make more details, and by doing that, the suppliers will follow those instructions even to a greater length. And what we always say is, well, if you define all kinds of requirements, the suppliers will do exactly that or just a little bit less, right? So the minimum that you set will probably be the maximum that you get, if you're lucky, I would say. So it's like a paradox, right? Because the minimum becomes the maximum, and what I think is the better solution is to not set the minimum, and let's look at what suppliers are able to bring to the table, and that might be a lot more, right? So if you say the coffee should taste like a 7, right, on a 1 to 10 scale, you probably get a 7, and probably you get a 6.9 because that's also a 7, right? Or maybe even a 6.5, right? Because that's still within the margin, is actually a 7. Whereas if you say, I would like to have great coffee for our employees, and they need to be happy and they need to be very productive, dear suppliers, what can you bring us? There may be a supplier that says, you know what, my coffee is a 9.2, right, on a scale of 1 to 10. And instead of dictating them what to do and how to get the 7, you now get the 9.2, and the KPI is not a 7 anymore. It's now a 9.2 because the supplier, he promised, and not only promised, but he also substantiated that he's able to supply a 9.2. And this is like a totally different paradigm. And you have to experience this probably in order to
is it
continue with doing this? Yeah.
Is it tied in? I mean, it's all about trust, isn't it? And,
yeah.
and everyone seems to have struggled with trust in the last decade. But is that because of being let down? Is it a fear of failure? Is it a fear of things going pear-shaped? Is it just got to just get more positive about things?
Yes, and so there's two ways of trust, right? One is relational trust, and that I trust you based on your, on who you are and on your blue eyes, and because I'm not a distrusting person. But that's one thing. But there's another kind of trust, and that's trust based on metrics and on proof and on substantiation. And what I like to use in my work when I assist clients is that we are actually looking at, if they say the coffee tastes like a 9.2, can they substantiate this, right? And if they can substantiate this, why should I be distrustful, right? That's kind of ridiculous. Because, maybe the distrust was there because you were also not trusting the supplier, and then you start off from the wrong foot, right? So what I think is necessary is that also buyers are setting the right example. So if you start a procurement process with all kinds of fear that the supplier is going to do a bad job, and therefore you write all kinds of requirements, right? Well, then of course what happens is that the supplier takes these requirements and do as little as possible in order to make money, right? And then, yeah, probably you will end up with a 6.9. Whereas if you gave him lots of room and you let's say honored their expertise, then you get a different system. And I truly believe that it starts with also not having that much distrust in the supplier base, because suppliers are very capable if we just let them do their work, right? So by having a situation where clients are dictating all the time, well, you create a system where also the vendors are not very happy.
I liked what you said earlier about fluff. I mean, fluff doesn't cut it, does it? No one can fluff anything anymore, I think it's fair to say, because everything has to be now about what you deliver and what is measurable. But that's actually a good thing, isn't it? That's what's going to build trust again.
Yeah, so I think metrics, they will bring trust to the table. And of course, there needs to be more than that, right? So you can measure whatever you like, and especially invested, it's more than the vendor's metrics. It's also about boundary spanning metrics, right? And then how can you collaborate together? What I think we've seen, enough great projects where there's a buyer-supplier relation that truly works, and I would take that as an example to see, okay, we can change from this antagonistic, buyer-supplier relation towards a situation where we can actually collaborate and where we utilize the expertise of the suppliers.
Now, are you hopeful that we're going to see greater change come into the future? Because it's taken time, hasn't it, to get to this point?
Yes, and you know what? The interesting thing is when we talk at universities or to young people, they are always a bit, they are looking at it. Why are you telling this story? Because this is like common sense, right? For new people, this is actually, just common sense. But if you are, in the business for a very long time and you are disappointed, you've been disappointed for quite some time, then you start to behave in a different way. And what I think is there will always be people who don't trust their suppliers. And by the way, there will also always be suppliers who will, trust their buyers. But there's also a big part of people who really would like to make this work, and who are positive and who can see things that that things can be different. And so I am optimistic, but at the same time, there will always be people who also in their private situation will tell to their the guy who's going to do the painting or the guy who's going to do the roofing, what, I want you to do it like this, or I want you to do it like this. So those people will always be there. But I also think people will recognize expertise, and they will see just by case by case that a different way of working really helps.
So do you think the pandemic's been a catalyst for change? Has it been a good thing to help this process? Because my view is there's more people talking about collaboration than ever before.
Yeah, and I think that's true, and I think that the true transactional, what's in it for me mindset, is hopefully something of the past, right? But there are still some people who are really focusing on themselves and want to optimize it for themselves. But I think many people now also see that collaboration can truly work, and I think that's a good thing. And what you also see is that the pandemic shows that there's a need for flexible contracts, and because if you have a let's say a fixed contract where risks are being shifted, that doesn't work. So in a way, this pandemic brings at least an understanding that flexibility is needed. And if flexibility is needed in contracts, that means that you would also have a need for a different kind of way on how to procure. So of course, contract management after the award, it needs to be translated into a bidding process that resembles that, I would say, right? So especially, of course, in the public sector, you cannot just change your contract after the award. So you need to also do a different kind of bidding process in order to get towards those contracts. And that is not super easy. That takes time. But it's, I would say, well worth the effort. And again, there will always be people who don't believe it, and there will also always be people who are willing to change. And what we have done is look for those people and work with those people and try, by using the examples that we've made together, try to, let's say, convince the majority. And that's what we've seen in work in the Netherlands. Yeah.
That's very good. Jeroen, look, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure, Chris.
It's been a real delight.
Bye.